Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from 9th group, and the group consists of Farhaniatul Auli and me, Isanul Ma'arif. We would like to present about the nature of style, context, and register. The first material will be delivered by Farhaniatul Auli. Auli, time is yours.
Addressee as an influence on his style. Addressee is the terminology used by people when they are talking to others, and this varies according to their education, their social standing, their profession, or their specific kind of work, or it can be determined by their nationality or their ethnicity. So, the better you know someone, the more relaxed the speech style you will use to them. I will give you the example. People use considerably more standard form to those they don't know well. But when we are talking with our friends, we use more vernacular forms. Here another example. And study in Northern Ireland, for instance, people used more standard English forms with an English stranger visiting their village. Then they did talking to a fellow villager. Next is age of addressee. Many speakers also use a different style in addressing elderly people, often with the features similar to those which characterize their speech to children. A simpler range of vocabulary and less complex grammar. Some adjust their speech style more than others. Even 3 years old have been heard using sing-song baby talk words like doggy when talking or writing to a 6 years old as opposed to a 30 years old. Most people simpler vocabulary and grammatical construction. And the next is social background of addressee. The social context affects the choice of forms of address, which are used between people for communicative purposes, or when the addresser wants to attract the attention of the interlocutor, or when communicators want to establish their personal social position in relation to the addresses, including respect to status, class, and social class of speakers. Variation of this language regarding all personal problems of the speakers, such as age, education, gender, occupation, level of nobility, socioeconomic circumstances, and etc. The next is accommodation theory, speech convergence, and speech divergence. Accommodation theory is a theory about how to adjust when communicating between speaker and listener. When people talk to each other, their speech often becomes more similar. This process is called speech accommodation. It tends to happen when the speaker like one another, or where one speaker has a vested interest in pleasing the other or putting them at ease. In other words, when communicating, everyone is united with the conversation of the person they are talking to. The next is accommodation theory, speech convergence, and speech divergence. Accommodation theory is a theory about how to adjust when communicating between speaker and listener. When people talk to each other, their speech often becomes more similar. This process is called speech accommodation. It tends to happen when the speaker like one another, or where one speaker has a vested interest in pleasing the other or putting them at ease. In other words, when communicating, everyone is united with the conversation of the person they are talking to.
Okay, the next material is formal context and social role. Characteristics of the address are powerful influence on style choice. Example, if a student in school and his father is a teacher in the school, he then have to address him with Mr. or Miss. This is all because of people's role in this formal context. They have to determine the appropriate speech style. In the example, the choice of appropriate form is influenced not by personal relationship between the participant, but by the formality of the context and their relative roles and situates within that setting. Okay, the next is style, colloquial style, or the vernacular. And then, style is a language variation which reflects change in visual factor, address, setting, task, topic. Style is often analyzed along scale of formality. The level of formality is influenced by some factors like various difference among the participant, topic, emotional involvement, and etc. There are other strategies besides topic manipulation which have been used in order to capture people's most relaxed speech style. Tapping groups of people than individual, choosing a very comfortable or informal setting, for example, an interview one to interview a group of African American teenagers. So he went to meet them in the street there where they meet. This kind of interview increase the number of participants and contribute more relaxed speech because the style of speech is related to the environment, topic, participant, and emotional. Okay, the next is the interaction of social class and styles. Language can show the class of someone in the society. High class people are people who have high education, politeness, important people, or maybe sometimes they are rich people. Furthermore, the people of lower class were in front of him. High caste people will differ from lower caste people in their language. When we want to shift style, the obvious way to for speech is imitate the speech for another person. For example, in order to sound more casual, people models their speech on that lower social groups. For example, when someone wants to go toilet, they will say, "Excuse me, would you like to show me the direction to the toilet?" And in order in order to sound more formal, they use people from a higher social group as their speech model. So when they shift style, people often adopt the linguistic feature to different group. For example, from the high class is, "Excuse me, would you like to show me a direction to the restroom?" Like that. The next is register. Register is the language used at any given time. It depends on what do you do, by whom, and by what means. The register indicates the type of social process taking place. Register can be simply described as variation of a language according to usage. And register, when they are distinguished from style, tend to be associated with particular group of people or sometimes specific situation of use in language of which common interest or job. For example, sport announcer talk when people describe a sporting event. The language they use is quite clearly distinguished able from language used in other contexts. Sport announcer makes extensive use linguistic formulas and routines. And that's all the presentation. We are sorry if there are any mistake. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.